Viewers, thank you for joining us on Times Now. We are building up to the all-important bilateral, the Modi-Xi bilateral, and the eyes of the world are fixed on Tianjin in China. In precisely 30 minutes from now, Prime Minister Modi will sit across the table from the Chinese President Xi Jinping at the SCO Summit. Viewers, this is a moment that could reshape the contours of the global geopolitics in more ways than one. And this comes on the back of Trump's punishing tariffs on India. So that's the mood and backdrop. Viewers, this summit in Tianjin is a gathering of giants. Prime Minister Modi, Xi Jinping, Russian President Putin, and leaders from Central Asia, South Asia, and the Middle East. But make no mistake about it, the spotlight is on the Modi-Xi bilateral. This is Modi's first visit to China in 7 years. A trip that comes on the heels of a dramatic downturn in the Indo-US relations. This is, in a way, Prime Minister Modi's way of telling Trump that, look, Indian economy is not dead and Indian autonomy is unchallenged. Viewers, this meeting is India's way to recalibrate its strategic compass. Prime Minister Modi walks into Tianjin not as, some ordinary leader, but as the leader of the world's largest democracy, representing a country that refuses to be bullied or boxed in. Mind you, by engaging with Xi Jinping, Prime Minister Modi is sending an unmistakable message to Trump's administration in Washington that India is not dependent on the US alone. Our partnerships are diverse, our options are vast, and our national interest is non-negotiable. The world is watching, viewers, because this meeting signals India's pivot, a deliberate, calculated move to assert its role as a pole in a multipolar world. I've stressed that point many times. But viewers, let's be clear, this is not about replacing one superpower with another. So it's not as if, things are not great with America, so let's turn to China. That's not how this should be looked at. For China, this summit is a golden opportunity to project itself as a stabilizing force, a counterweight to the US, especially as Trump's tariff rattles allies and adversaries alike. So Xi Jinping will use this stage to showcase China's leadership of the global South, rallying nations like India, Russia, Iran, etc. to challenge the US-centric world order. Viewers, the optics are powerful. Think of it, Modi and Xi sharing a stage, discussing trade, troop withdrawals along the line of actual control, signaling a thaw in the Indo-China ties after the icy standoff in Galwan. Beijing will spin this to its advantage to show that, look, China can broker peace and prosperity. But viewers, India walks into this summit with its eyes wide open. Trust is not a currency easily spent with China. Let me say that again. We can't trust the Chinese. We cannot ignore Beijing's troubling track record. China's role in propping up Pakistan. Its role in giving Pakistan weapons, fighter jets, missiles, etc. This is not the behavior of a partner we can fully trust. So as Modi sits with Xi Jinping, he will carry the weight of India's security concerns, knowing that any reset in ties must be grounded in mutual respect, reciprocity, not one-sided concessions. And for America and Trump, this summit should serve as a reality check, viewers. Trump's tariff tirade has pushed India to hedge its bets. The Modi-Xi bilateral will be closely watched in Washington, as in other parts of the world, not just for what is said, but for what it implies. India will not bend to economic coercion. If the US wants India as a partner, it must respect our choices, whether it's buying Russian oil, engaging with Beijing, or even punishing Pakistan for terror. So let's quickly open this up. Sudhindra Kulkarni, Prabhu Dayal, former ambassador, Dr. Richard Benkin, author and journalist, Lieutenant General K.J.S. Dhillon, Dr. Anand Ranganathan on the broadcast, Sinjoy Chaudhary, and my colleague Swati Joshi joining us from Tianjin. Swati, in about what, 23 minutes from now, the meeting kicks off. Modi, Xi in one room after 7 years.
Absolutely. You know, both the leaders spoke to each other and decided that we need to normalize ties. That happened in Kazan, something that the Prime Minister also spoke about when the Foreign Minister of China visited India, Wang Yi. The Prime Minister said, you know, the groundwork was laid when both the heads of the state spoke about it. So these are signals. The fact that the Prime Minister accepted the invite and decided to come to China after 7 years, first time after Galwan, are signs that, yes, both nations want ties to normalize. But normalizing of ties does not mean that you forget everything that has happened in the past. Like you said, if China is trying to send out a message by bringing India, Russia and having that sort of a trilateral sending a message to US, then India is doing that as well, and US knows it very clearly that it needs a strong partner and an ally like India if it wants to counter China. But America, you know, I feel is also playing the good cop, bad cop role at the moment, with Navarro calling the Ukraine war Modi's war. But then Mr. Besant immediately, you know, after that saying that, yes, you know, ultimately both nations are going to figure out what needs to be done next. Donald Trump keeps saying Modi is a terrific leader, Modi is my friend, but then you don't impose sanctions on your friends, or you don't penalize your friends for doing trade with someone else when you yourself are indulging in that. So Donald Trump has only been making decisions that have hurt India's prospects, and that also brings a dent, you know, in the relationship that both countries share. But ultimately, we all know, Pranesh, that the administrations will change, the dynamics will keep changing. You just have to adapt according to that. And India is a mature democracy. India does not need lecturing from anyone else. A mature democracy will make its way through complex strategies.
Swati, just stay with us, and I'm sure, you know, our guests who are with us will also have things to ask, you know, how's the mood, etc., etc. But, you know, when we were talking yesterday, you had a Chinese daily with you, and Sudhindra Kulkarni's piece was there in that paper. SCO reflects the vision of peace and security. We have Mr. Kulkarni in person here. Sir, good morning. What do you make of the meeting of Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping? How should this be seen?
Thank you for having me on your show. As someone who has been working consistently for the past 2 decades for better relations between India and China, I see Prime Minister Modi's visit to China this time and the one-to-one meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping as the beginning of a major breakthrough in our bilateral relations, as well as having a significance for the region and the world as a whole. We are the 2 largest countries in the world. We are neighbors, we are Asians, and we are inheritors of 2 great civilizations. Of course, in recent times, there are some problems between India and China, but we are mature enough to resolve these problems in a peaceful manner, as the past 5 years' efforts have shown. And therefore, if we come together, we can reshape Asia and we can reshape the world. The world order is changing in a very rapid way. It was never unipolar after the emergence of China, but there are people in the West, especially in the United States, that still cling to the illusion that they are heading a unipolar world, which is bunkum. The world is multipolar. India is a major pole, China is a major pole, Russia is a major pole, there are other poles also, and therefore all these multiple poles have to work together in a democratic manner with mutual respect, mutual sensitivity to their core interests, so that
this mutual respect and sensitivity, Mr. Kulkarni, that you're talking about, can you, and like you said, you've been, you know, working at it. Can India trust China? Because, you know, you said China is one pole. Now, in that Chinese poll, the Chinese allow the Pakistanis also, and we can't have that.
You see, if you want trust, both have to work together. There has certainly been a trust deficit between India and China, but the way out of this issue is not to depend on a third party. This is what some of Indians have been trying, to become friends with the US, even to have an alliance with the US to counter China. And that strategy has backfired spectacularly, because the closer we went to America, they felt that they can bully us. And we have seen how utterly contemptuous the United States was to our core interests. And therefore, now, because there is a downturn in India-US relations, we rush to China. That is not the right approach. You know, tomorrow, I'm sure there will be an upturn in India-US relations, and that should indeed happen, because United States is a major power in the world, and we should have good relations with America. But that doesn't mean that once that happens, we again are back to square one with China. We should have good relations with America. We should have good relations with our neighbor China. And one more thing, in fact, this is also a way to resolve our differences with Pakistan, because Operation Sindoor has shown conclusively that there is no military solution to India-Pakistan problem. A repeat of Operation Sindoor is not going to solve any problem. Dialogue is the only way, and therefore the sooner India and Pakistan come on a dialogue table, the better it is for the two
Mr.
countries.
Kulkarni, I wanted to avoid this bit, but you know, here we are in the first 14 minutes of our conversation. We are back to dialogue with Pakistan. Now, you can write as many pieces as you want. There is nothing that India can do by talking to Pakistan. Pakistan understands the language that we spoke to during Operation Sindoor, and that's the only language. Sir, I'm sorry. You know, look, I have grown up reading your pieces, listening to you, sir. You articulate your views, you have a point of view, all that is fine. I have respect for you, Mr. Kulkarni, but that's not how India-Pakistan relationship will be. Gone are the days of the past, sir. I'm sorry to say this. With no offense. Dr. Ranganathan, before I bring you in, General Dhillon has been with us, he joined us at 7 a.m. also. General Dhillon, when people like Sudhindra Kulkarni, reasoned voices, say that, look, even now we have to talk to Pakistan, let's have dialogue, etc. Let's trust China. What does one say?
Good morning, and good morning to the fellow panelists and your viewers. I also have tremendous respect for Mr. Kulkarni and his views, notwithstanding that. See, today is a time when we are passing through an era of policy uncertainties. You know, we are looking at India, Russia, China, 3 nuclear powers, 3 major poles as part of SCO and the SCO meeting. And if we are thinking that we are going to get something drastically big out of it, sorry, it's not going to happen. The long-term policies don't change with one meeting or with one person levying taxes. Their long-term policies are on shared interests. And between India and China, we have trust deficit, as Mr. Kulkarni said, and all the 10 permanent members of the SCO. We do not have any shared interest or shared objective. All the 10 members of SCO, we are the only practicing democracy 100%. Others are democracies in bits and pieces. So all these are fundamental points on which the trust will build. So we got to be very clear, our interest or our problems with Pakistan are our and they are going to stay. And Operation Sindoor has proved, when 2 nuclear powers came to war for the first time in history, 3rd nuclear power assisted a particular nuclear power in real time, providing intelligence and all the weapon systems, as you just said. So I don't think Pakistan is going to mend its way. having seen Pakistan, having fought terrorism for the last 40 years, myself in uniform. That's an illusion. Let's keep that aside. And SCO, we should only concentrate on calling out Pakistan's homegrown and from fountainhead of Pakistan being a terrorist state. That is what we should be looking at from the SCO. And just a few days ago, Mr. Rajnath Singh refused to sign a document. Do you think the minds, the conscience will change within few days? I am looking at SCO very positively with great outcomes, but with caution and with our interest being the prime interest when we enter. And Mr. Modi, I'm sure, is going with all the background intelligence and information, and we will come out of this to face the Trump tariffs and Pakistan also in the future.
Well said, General, because you recounted your experience of serving in uniform and how Pakistan won't change its stripes. Sudhir Kulkarni is someone who's who keeps going to Pakistan, who's addressed many seminars in the Pakistani High Commission, but nothing has changed and nothing will change. Now this school of thought that we share a common past, our future also has to be common. I'm sorry, that is not how things are or will be. Dr. Ranganathan?
Good morning, Pranesh, and good morning to my fellow panelists. I've been listening very intently to this wonderful, enchanting debate, very informative. I need to make a couple of points. Number one, let's get one thing straight. You can trust China as much as you can trust Dracula to keep his mouth shut at a blood donation camp. The fact is not about trusting China or America or any other country. The fact is everyone is looking for his or her own gains, purposes, or in fact the road forward. That is what this world has become. There are no permanent enemies and there are certainly no permanent friends. And as far as China is concerned, I welcome this move by Prime Minister Modi to meet the President Xi Jinping. But the fact of the matter is this has purely been brought about because of the so-called adage of an enemy is a friend. And, if Trump doesn't listen to reason, you have to out-bully the bully. And BRICS is one mechanism by which the bully can be shown the mirror or at least his place in the interim. Now, please remember, in this meeting also would be President Putin. And I would associate an importance more of Mr. Modi meeting Mr. Putin than Mr. Xi Jinping because of the simple fact that China's foreign policy will remain the same, antagonistic towards India, irrespective of this meeting. I think China also realizes, because Trump has antagonized China as well. China realizes the same thing. China is not trusting India. India is not trusting China. But the two great nations have come together to combat Trump and his irrational logic, especially when it comes to buying Russian oil. I mean, 2 years ago, it was the Americans who were forcing us or prodding us to buy Russian oil to stabilize the oil prices. And when we buy Russian energy, less it must be said than what China is buying Russian energy, less it must be said than what EU is buying Russian energy. And when America continues to buy Russian energy as well as precious metals as well as uranium, why is it that 25% ad valorem tariffs on account of us buying Russian oil has been imposed only on us? So the world is unfair. Let's be honest about it. We are just redressing the balance and declaring that, look, we are not going to be browbeaten by some bully. And that is the backdrop of this meeting. Now, very quickly, as far as Pakistan is concerned, I have profound disagreement with Mr. Kulkarni. He was the one, please remember, who was supporting the Indus Water Treaty, the most draconian, anti-national, anti-India treaty ever promulgated. It is a mark of shame that Prime Minister Nehru signed up this treaty in 1960, basically giving away 80% of Indian waters. Such a treaty does not exist of China with any of its neighbors, with any of its rivers that are going downstream, for example, Brahmaputra to India. But we signed away this treaty, and our farmers and our whole dispensation has suffered for 60 years. Now, one of the greatest decisions of Prime Minister Modi has been to put the same Indus Water Treaty in abeyance, and long may that continue. So let us not talk about this issue of meeting with a very important neighbor, China, and conflate it with our issues vis-a-vis the terror state of Pakistan. We don't want anything to do with Pakistan whatsoever.
Right. Ambassador Dayal, how do you see this as, Modi gets set to have that interaction one-to-one with Xi Jinping?
Well, I agree entirely with what Mr. Ranganathan said regarding the backdrop of Prime Minister Modi's meeting with Xi Jinping. Now, as he pointed out, the aggressive U.S. tariff policy under the Trump administration has had the unintended consequence of pushing India and China closer together. And faced with U.S. antagonism, India has recalibrated its foreign policy and now seeks better relations with its northern neighbor. This is Prime Minister Modi's first trip to China since the 2020 Galwan clash, and this signals a cautious diplomatic thought. Let me also mention that before leaving for China from Japan, Prime Minister Modi gave an interview to the Yomiuri Shimbun, which is Japan's largest newspaper,
right,
in which he said that given the current volatility in the world economy, it is important for India and China as two major economies to work together to bring stability to the world economic order. And Prime Minister also said that stable, predictable and amicable bilateral relations between India and China can have a positive impact on regional and global peace and prosperity. Let me also mention that this visit by Prime Minister to China comes less than 2 weeks after the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi visited India and held talks with our External Affairs Minister, Mr. Jaishankar, and the National Security Advisor, Mr. Ajit Doval. And both sides unveiled a framework for a stable, cooperative, and forward-looking relationship. So these moves build on the October 21 agreement last year that completed the troop disengagement at the remaining friction points of Demchok and Demsang. Effectively, that ended the Eastern Ladakh face-off that began with the 2020 Galwan clashes. So in conclusion, let me just say that the renewed engagement marks a sharp turn from years of standoff, suggesting that both leaders, that is Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping, see an advantage in stabilizing ties at a time when U.S. tariffs are shaking the foundations of global trade.
Ambassador, sharp turn for sure, but let's not forget what the Chinese were up to during Operation Sindoor. So that will be at the back of Prime Minister Modi's mind. Dr. Ranganathan has his hand up quickly. Yes, sir.
No, very quickly, as I said, we must also put equal importance. The ambassador is absolutely right, and I thank him for his views. We must also put equal importance to Mr. Putin being there. Let's not forget that. So I think very quickly, 10 seconds, what we want from Mr. Putin is concessions on the oil as much as what we were being given 2 years ago, 24%. And what we want with China is that our trade deficit, which is ballooned from what was $1 billion in 2004 to what is $100 billion now. Please remember, by 2014, 10 years of UPA, it ballooned 3,600%. So if we can have China reduce that trade deficit a little bit, our overarching aim is to negate or offset the 50% Trump tariff effect, which is going to offset our GDP by 0.3%. If we can do that, I think this trip would be more than successful.
And these are hard numbers, so no disputing that. And moreover, the sentiment is about having a fair deal, whatever it is, whether it is national security, trade, or, China's ties with Pakistan. No one is telling Mr. Xi Jinping that, look, abandon Pakistan, but then treat Pakistan on merit. If a country which is also very close to China is pushing terrorism, then you can't turn, your head away and say that, look, it's okay. Masood Azhar should not be designated as a global terrorist. I come back to now, Dr. Benkin. I beg your indulgence. Let me bring in Mr. Kulkarni once again. Mr. Kulkarni, you've in the past said that, look, India should financially help Pakistan. That we've done on multiple occasions. You've written pieces in Pakistani newspapers to argue that, look, there is this sense of hatred towards Pakistan that should go. What has that yielded, sir? Nothing. Pakistan remains the rogue nation that it was.
On Pakistan, I only want to reiterate something that I wanted to say but couldn't earlier in the discussion. And that is, India-Pakistan relations will never improve unless Pakistan stops a complete and stops terrorism in every form. Without that, there is no improvement possible. But this summit is not about Pakistan. So let me therefore turn to the benefits of this summit and the benefits of Prime Minister Modi's meeting with Xi Jinping for India. Now, a point was made, a very important point, that in recent years, the trade deficit between India and China has ballooned to nearly or even more than $100 billion. This must be bridged, and this can only be bridged in two ways. That is, India should be able to export more goods to China. China should buy more from India. And secondly, China should invest more in India. Now, the ground is now ready for both things to happen. There are areas such as renewable energy, infrastructure development, artificial intelligence. These are areas where China has undisputed dominance in the world. For example, just last year, 2024, China added more renewable energy than all the rest of the world combined. And there are many Indian companies, leading Indian companies, that want to have joint ventures with China, that want to have technology transfer with China. All this can be facilitated if India and China get back their relations on the normal track. Secondly,
I understand that, Mr. Kulkarni. Sorry to cut you off. I understand the sentiment. But look, the onus can't always be on India. All we are opposed to is this rogue behavior, with Beijing, with Washington. That's all. And Swati is now joining us. I'll come back to you, Mr. Kulkarni. Swati, in about a minute or so, that bilateral gets underway.
Absolutely. And everybody is looking forward to that, especially Donald Trump, I'm sure. Just look at how this year started, the growing bonhomie between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Donald Trump, and both the nations discussing the expansionist policy of China. And look at where we are today, with Donald Trump slapping tariffs on every other country, an additional one on India because it does not want India to buy Russian oil, putting pressure on India so that it can get Russia to come to the negotiation table. And India has taken a strong stand against that. India has highlighted the hypocrisy of Donald Trump doing trade with Russia, at the same time imposing tariffs on India for doing the same. So that stand India has already taken. Whether or not those tariff issues come up during the discussion remains to be seen. Whether or not officially there will be a mention of that in the joint statement is something that everyone has to watch out for. Then there will be a reception this evening. There's also going to be a press briefing where we'll get additional details about the conversation that both the leaders had. But tomorrow is also a very important day, Pranesh. Let's not forget the bilateral between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Russian President, Mr. Vladimir Putin. Before joining the SCO Summit, he's already spoken about the sanctions on India by America. He's called the practice unfair. So, these nations, which is half of BRICS, India, Russia and China, on the issue of tariff have a similar stand, which is against the tariff, which is hitting out at America, at West for its hypocrisy. As far as the relationship between India and China are concerned, there are contentious issues that we've been discussing, since morning. But one has to move forward. One has to move ahead of the challenges and the contentious issues, while keeping it in mind that in the past we've had a very, very difficult relationship. When you've had cooperation, you had confrontation as well between both the nations. But you'll have to maneuver your way through complex strategies. Now look at, India's position. Prime Minister is coming to China from Japan. It has to also balance its partnership with Japan while maintaining a healthy relationship with China. So we are getting into multilateral engagements at the moment, and the more you interact with nations and want to build a healthy, stronger ties, the more diplomacy comes to fore. At the moment, all eyes on the bilateral. Like you said, what are the issues that will be discussed? Will the issue of terrorism, will the issue of China being an all-weather friend to Pakistan come up? Will that talk happen between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Xi Jinping also remains to be seen. But China, this is a very smart strategy. While China continues to supply arms to Pakistan, we saw that during Operation Sindoor as well. Publicly, the kind of statements that are released by China are always condemning terrorism. In fact, in the Pahalgam terror attack case as well, China said that it condemns this act of terrorism, but it never, of course, called out Pakistan. So that we have to keep in mind. Will there be a conversation about Pakistan's involvement in Pahalgam, about China's support to Pakistan? Will trade come up? The trade deficit? Will the issue of unresolved...
Right. It's a bit like this. The Chinese give weapons to Pakistan, and the Pakistani deep state, the military there and the ISI, they hand over those weapons to their mujahideens, the terrorists. Now, let's bring in Dr. Benkin. Dr. Benkin, how is Washington watching this?
Well, I would say, first of all, thank you for having me on. I think the first thing we need to understand here in the United States is I believe that India and Prime Minister Modi are doing exactly the right and smartest thing you're supposed to do. They're making it very clear that India is a strong, independent, self-reliant nation that's going to operate in the best interest of its people. And I think that, by the way, fits perfectly into the kind of negotiations we'd like to have on these issues. Now, having said that, however, I do want to just augment it, not taking away what I just said. I think, again, it's the right strategy that India is taking right now. But I think, having said that, we need to mention the elephant in the living room, and that is the United States consumer market. Neither China nor India neither of their economies can soar without a significant part of the consumer market of the United States of America, and they can't replace for each other. Now, for instance, in the United States, in India, in most developed nations, the percent of the GDP represented by the domestic market is somewhere in the 60s. In China, it's completely flipped. It's in the 30s. China just does not have the capacity to provide India what it needs economically that the United States can. However, I think what India is doing that's very smart is that in addition to that economic relationship, the United States and India have extremely important geopolitical interests in common. And by doing what Prime Minister Modi is doing right now, I think he's making a statement that, hey, look, we're going to operate independently, and if you want us to be that bulwark for you, you're going to have to start working with us a little more cooperatively, or the negotiations are going to have to go in a different way. I think people in Washington are taking note of that.
It's interesting, Dr. Benkin, you've mentioned Prime Minister Modi at least 4 times, and you said, let's address the elephant in the room. Let's call out the bully in the room. His name is Donald Trump. Let's call him out.
Well, I have to tell you, I've been listening to everyone, and I got to tell you, I do understand the feelings that people have, because I know I felt bad about the turn in U.S.-India relations, some of the rhetoric we've seen. However, I think name-calling really doesn't add anything to it. I don't think Trump is being a bully. I think President Trump is negotiating, or his team is negotiating, as they know how to negotiate. And as he said...
Dr. Benkin, for all of this advocacy for Mr. Trump, answer one simple question. How can you wrap your head around the fact that Donald Trump had the gall to say that the Indian economy is dead?
Yeah. Hey, look, I can't wrap my head around that either. I don't agree with that. But the fact is, again, I don't know how that. I always felt that if someone cries bully, 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 or something like that, it's sort of saying, hey, this isn't fair, instead of just saying, I don't care if this guy's a bully. I can stand up to whatever anyone throws at me. That's what India is saying, I think, in this. Dr.
Ranganathan, Trump is not a bully.
Now, I think what the previous panelist was trying to say is that, yes, Trump is a bully, but let's not call him a bully, which is a bit strange, because what else would you call a bully? He's agreeing to the fact that Trump is bullying, that Trump is being irrational, that Trump called world's large nations' economy, fastest growing economy, as a dead economy. So when Trump is wrong, let's appreciate and call him out. The fact of the matter is that when America is still buying Russian energy, when President Putin in Alaska stands up in front of Trump and says, the moment Trump came to power, our Russia-US trade has increased by 20%. And yet it is only India that Trump has, levied or slapped these 25% ad valorem tariffs on account of us buying Russian energy. So, of course, hypocrisy will be called out. But let me also please remind the previous panelist, when he says that America is an important cog, no doubt, every large nation in the world is an important cog for India. But let's remember that the trade that would be affected by the tariffs is 5% of India's overall exports. Now, those can be easily offset by our improved relations of trade with China, for example, if we reduce that deficit, or indeed, if we extract large concessions from Russia on account of buying oil. Now, it's already been reported multiply, in fact, by Times Now as well as Bloomberg, that far from decreasing the amount of Russian oil that we are buying, 32% of our total need, India, in fact, increased the amount of Russian oil that it's going to buy in September. So much for, being cowed down by bullies. So let's call the irrationality and illogic of Trump out, and let's call a bully a bully.
Yeah, and while we're having this conversation, viewers, that Modi-Xi bilateral has begun. Swati, it's 40 minutes have been set aside for this meeting, but as we know, these bilaterals can sometimes, extend.
Absolutely. Well, it depends on what are the issues that are being brought up by both the leaders. Like I said, the groundwork was already done by the foreign minister of China when he came, and that too after both the leaders spoke in Kazan. And Prime Minister also posted about it. The Prime Minister said that the relationship between India and China should improve, for which both the leaders have already discussed. So they had already laid down a map for the teams to work on the issue of terrorism. I just want to quickly go back to that issue. On the issue of terrorism, when the foreign ministers meeting happened over the SCO Summit, S. Jaishankar spoke about the issue and emphasized that the member nations of SCO have to send a strong message of intolerance against terrorism. When the defense ministers meeting of the SCO Summit happened, Pranesh, you remember that Rajnath Singh refused to sign the joint draft statement because it had no mention of the Pahalgam attack. And by no mention of the Pahalgam attack, India very clearly meant that the role of Pakistan was completely omitted from that joint draft statement. So India stood up to that. And once you make that kind of statement by refusing to sign the joint draft statement because it had no mention of a ghastly terror attack, dastardly terror attack that has taken place on your land by another member nation of SCO, India has already sent that message loud and clear that while we have zero tolerance for terrorism, we are now asking you, the member nations of SCO, to stand up to your commitment, which was that SCO is going to counter challenges like terrorism, extremism and separatism. So now is the time. Now is the time to send out that strong message, and that's the reason why I'm saying that India's objective also is to get all the member nations to issue such a strong statement. And when that happens, if that happens in presence of Pakistan, because Pakistan is also a member of the SCO, it is going to be extremely significant, and it would also, then perhaps reduce that trust deficit a little bit. I'm not saying it's going to completely go away as far as China's support to Pakistan is concerned, because we all know the reality. China's not
China's compulsion. That support is not going away, nor will Pakistan ever stop exporting terrorism. Mr. Kulkarni here in good faith can write as many pieces as he wants, but nothing will change. India is not foolish to embrace China, and not foolish enough to see the Chinese embrace of the Pakistanis also. Sinjoy, quickly, the bilateral has begun. 40 minutes. Dr. Jenkin, I'll come to you, sir. I'll come to you. Just a moment. I'll come to you. I'll bring you back. Sinjoy.
Yes. The most important things to see at the bilateral is if there is going to be forward movement on the LAC, is the process of de-escalation going to start? Yes, Swati was right when she said that, yes, Wang Yi was here, he met Jaishankar, he met Ajit Doval, and was any discussion on this issue? Was there any talk about a final decision being taken after the two leaders met? So that is something we have to look out for. Also, the Chinese ambassador, when he last spoke here, gave an indication that the Chinese markets could open more to India. And he spoke specifically about pharma and IT exports. I don't know about IT, but pharma, certainly the Chinese could buy a lot of. And if that was so, then certainly the trade deficit could come down a little bit. There's a lot more India can export to China. Besides that, the issue of terrorism has come up again and again in these discussions. Tell me, if you're a responsible country, if you are a P5 country, why should you block or delay any effort to designate a terrorist as
That's a fair
again
question.
and
Let's
again?
put that to Mr. Kulkarni.
Why will that happen again and again? Not once, not twice,
Let's put that to
5
Mr.
or 6
Kulkarni.
times.
Yeah, you're right,
Why would
Sinjoy.
China do that?
Let's have Mr. Kulkarni answer that.
Yeah, what is the question you ask me again, please?
So why does China keep blocking sanctions for terrorists who have their origins and base in Pakistan?
Designating people as terrorists. Why does that happen? Not once, not twice.
I don't support this at all, and this is in fact one of the sources of the trust deficit between India and China, which China has to address. Having said this, we should not make our relations with China only focused on one issue and even make it dependent on one issue. There are many other areas that require India and China to have a discussion, and that is precisely what is happening right now. We can't take a stand that you designate Pakistan as a rogue terrorist state, otherwise we won't talk to you. That is not the stand that India can take, and that's not the stand that India has taken even vis-a-vis America, because we all know that America also supplies arms to Pakistan. But we continue talking to America because we have vital bilateral interests. Similarly, we have vital bilateral, multilateral and global issues to talk to China.
So what should India do? Mr. Kulkarni, if you were to, imagine you're in a room with Modi and Xi Jinping, and if you were to tell both these leaders 2 points each. Let's start with China.
One thing is absolutely clear. We should tell the Chinese, please tell us what you are doing to the issue of terrorism and separatism in Xinjiang. You deal with terrorism, extremism, religious extremism and separatism with a very heavy hand in Xinjiang. you will never allow any Islamic country to interfere in the affairs of Xinjiang. Now, that is precisely the stand that India should take. Secondly, we should tell China that India is an equal. We never enter into any relationship on the basis of inequality. We are equal to China, we are equal to America. And this is the only basis on which India-China relations can move smoothly ahead. Now, as far as Chinese message to India is concerned, that is for China to decide. But I would like to say that let's take an unprejudiced view of our relationship with China. Because in the past few years, we were so enamored of friendship with America that there were even people in India and also in the United States that were saying India should pull out of SCO, India should pull out of BRICS.
So that was for a reason.
Why do we need?
Mr. Kulkarni, but let me admit this and let me be candid with you, sir. Last point, you're barring the last point about the sentiment then and commentary. I am surprised with this version of Sudhindra Kulkarni. Dr. Ranganathan, he's saying things that I wanted to say.
No, but be that as it may, let's be very honest about here. I only see this meeting. Of course, it's an important meeting, but this meeting is purely for optics. Let's not conflate the issues out here. This meeting is not so that we can resolve our issues with China. This meeting is like you can say a magazine cover for Trump to see, a magazine delivered in the Oval Office, and he sees the face of Modi and Xi Jinping on the cover. That's all this meeting is about. Otherwise, you tell me one issue between India and China that has been resolved over the last 60 years. I can't think of one. And when you even think of so-called friendly regimes of India with China, in fact, it was Sham Saran, the Foreign Secretary of UPA, who said that China occupied 600 square kilometers of eastern Ladakh during the UPA, where our trade imbalance increased by 3,600% during the UPA, when China had 300 incursions inside India, some as deep as 28 kilometers in depth during the UPA. So nothing is resolved. Let's be very honest about it. This is just an optics to show Trump his place. And can I just say this, all said and done, I think the true contenders of Nobel Prize is in fact Trump and Rahul Gandhi, because they brought India and China together, and that MOU between Rahul Gandhi and China is responsible for today's meeting. So I thank them both, and they deserve the Nobel Prize.
Dr. Ranganathan, you'll be disappointed to know that this is not the kind of magazine that Donald Trump, subscribes to in the Oval Office. And the kinds that he subscribes to, we can't discuss that on national television. But Sinjoy, very quickly, the bilateral is underway. Who are the people who are involved in the meeting from both sides? Quickly.
Well, naturally, the two principals. Ajit Doval is going to be a very important player, and he has been. Let's not forget that he and Wang Yi have had a very important meeting. And the meeting was really about the border. Wang Yi, of course, on the other side. Naturally, the line the LAC will play a major role, as we've always mentioned. The fact that other issues are also there. The Chinese may have issues, but India is going to be very clear about its own objectives. Let's not forget one point, Pranesh. Who was the last major foreign leader to come to India before this trip? One of those, yes, Bongbong Marcos. And which country does China have bad relations with? Perhaps the worst relations in the Southeast Asian region, the Philippines. Now, I'm not sure, is that a message or is it not a message? That's the first thing. There are other issues that China and India can definitely talk about. Terrorism, of course, is one of those issues. Now, regardless of anything, I mean, how do you see a country that blocks efforts to designate terrorists? This is something that China will have to do some thinking about. Secondly, this issue about CPEC, the issue about South China Sea, even the issues that China feels very strongly about. I mean, something like Tibet. I mean, come on. To badmouth a man as holy as the Dalai Lama, I mean, what are we talking about? There has to be some basic sense that has to come from the Chinese side. So, my basic point is, the one expectation that India can have is de-escalation.
Right.
If de-escalation, or at least a move towards de-escalation happens, then Prime Minister
it's a realistic expectation, according to what we've heard from you so far. Ambassador Dayal, what are the sticking points that we hope we can resolve in this meeting, or through this meeting?
You know, in my first intervention, I was pointing out that some of the steps which are being taken by India and China are to try and improve the relationship. And you correctly pointed out that the contentious border issue still remains, and that prevents any meaningful normalization of the relationship. I entirely agree with this point of view. Now, while China and India have economic incentives to collaborate against US tariffs, deep strategic rivalry and long-standing border disputes will persist. Therefore, a fundamental realignment is unlikely, and India will continue to maintain a cautious stance towards China. Now, the recent improvements in India-China relations, therefore, should be viewed as a calculated tactical détente. India's recalibration of ties with China is an application of its policy of strategic autonomy, which prioritizes national interests. So while dialogue has resumed on issues like trade and people-to-people exchanges, deeper strategic and security cooperation will not be happening. So the trust deficit, as has been repeatedly pointed out, continues to run deep, and India and China are not really friendly in that sense. India views China with suspicion, particularly after the 2020 border clashes.
Dr. Ranganathan, do you have a few questions for Mr. Kulkarni?
No, I think, look, I respect his erudite views, and he's been in the foreign policy domain as a think tanker and as other issues as well for decades. So I am no one to, comment on what his views are, except that I humbly disagree with many of his views. But, I think we carry the danger of expecting too much from this meeting. I think this is a thaw in relations, and this is most welcome, as I said. But let's not forget the preamble, which is twofold. One, that this is purely for optics to show Trump his place. And number two, enemy of an enemy is a friend. There is nothing that China will do that will assuage India as far as Pakistan is concerned. Let's remember, 80% of Pakistan's weaponry is now Chinese. The Chinese refused to recognize Kashmir as viable part of India. You remember all those staple visas that were given. The Chinese refused to recognize branded terrorists, some of whose funerals were attended by top Pakistani generals, as a terror state. So we're not expecting, something cataclysmic to happen so that China changes its policy. No, we don't want that, in fact. This is purely a transactional meeting. This is to show the bullier place, and I hope Mr. Kulkarni at least now remembers what our unsavory past has been with Pakistan, and at least the steps he would appreciate what Mr. Modi has taken, especially for the abeyance of the Indus Water Treaty. I would like, Pranesh, through you, for him to change his view on the Indus Water Treaty at least. That would be a beginning.
Mr. Kulkarni, do you want to respond to that, sir?
As I said in the beginning, this debate is about the SCO. Indus Water Treaty is really unrelated to what we are discussing. Maybe, if you invite me, I will be very happy to have a debate with someone so articulate as Dr. Ranganathan. But this is not the forum right now. What I want to say is that I agree with him that Prime Minister Modi's visit to China and the bilateral meeting on the sidelines of the SCO Summit with President Xi Jinping is a thaw, which should be welcomed. Now, this breakthrough should become irreversible because there are many advantages, many benefits that India can draw, and similarly China. And therefore, bilateral relations, economic, trade, investment, as well as political, these should be improved, and of course the continuing dialogue on the border issue. The visit of Mr. Wang Yi, the foreign minister, has yielded some good results, including for the first time in recent years of India and China agreeing to explore an early harvest in solving the border issue, which is a very good sign, which means that if we can have an early harvest benefit.
Okay, we have all the signs. Those signs have always been there, but you know, those signs remain signs. Nothing happened of those. And taught you of mutual admiration, sir, and you know, irreversible chemistry. Well, the chemistry, viewers, between Dr. Ranganathan and Mr. Kulkarni, even if you know, this kind of mutual admiration and cooperation is achieved in the bilateral, you know, there will be many who will be very happy with it. Swati is back with us. Swati, all eyes on the outcomes of the meeting, and like I said in the beginning, it will be important to see not just what is said, but also things which are left unsaid.
बिल्कुल प्रणेश, जो बातें जॉइंट ड्राफ्ट स्टेटमेंट में मेंशन नहीं होंगी उस पर केवल चर्चा होगी, लेकिन जो ऑफिशियली जॉइंट ड्राफ्ट स्टेटमेंट में मेंशन किया जाएगा उससे आपको एक क्लियर आइडिया आएगा कि ये बायलैटरल की मीटिंग किस तरह की हुई है. अब एक डीएलटी हो रही है, डायरेक्ट लेवल टॉक्स, और एक बायलैटरल में केवल प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी और चाइना के राष्ट्रपति शी जिनपिंग हैं. डायरेक्ट लेवल टॉक्स जो हो रही है उसमें ऑफिशियल डिस्कशन बेसिकली होता है दोनों देशों के डेलीगेशन के बीच. अगर अपने डेलीगेशन की मैं बात करूं तो उसमें हमारे विदेश मंत्री हैं, हमारे एनएसए अजीत डोभाल हैं, फॉरेन सेक्रेटरी हैं, एमईए के और भी ऑफिशियल्स हैं. और जो बातें होनी चाहिए थी बॉर्डर डिस्प्यूट पे या अन्य मुद्दों पर, जैसे पीपल टू पीपल कनेक्ट, वो भारत में हो चुकी है. चाइना के विदेश मंत्री जब भारत आए थे तो इन इश्यूज पर बात हो गई है, लेकिन बायलैटरल में प्रधानमंत्री क्या मुद्दा उठाएंगे वो जानना बहुत अहम होगा. प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी एक ऐसे व्यक्ति हैं कि जो इस तरह के स्टेटमेंट्स, इस तरह के मुद्दों से, कॉम्प्लेक्स इश्यूज से भागते नहीं हैं. हमने इससे पहले भी कई सारे बायलैटरल्स में देखा कि इंडिया के जो कंसर्न्स हैं, इंडिया के जो इंटरेस्ट हैं, उसको बायलैटरल में बहुत मुखर हो करके प्रधानमंत्री उठाते हैं. तो देखना यही होगा कि ये जो बायलैटरल हो रहा है इसमें भी क्या प्रधानमंत्री इज ही गोइंग टू स्पीक अबाउट दोस कॉम्प्लेक्स कंटेंशियस issues between India and China. And I do agree with Dr. Anand Ranganathan that nothing is going to be resolved in the meeting. The fact that the Prime Minister admitted to and accepted the invitation to be here in China was to send out a signal that yes, India is looking to normalize ties. But to what extent? Normalizing of ties between India and China do not mean that China is going to completely cut its ties with Pakistan. That is not going to happen, and India as a mature democracy knows that. That's the beauty of diplomacy, isn't it, Pranesh? That you have a nation like USA, a president like Donald Trump, who's been slapping tariff after tariff on you, and still our foreign affairs minister says कि हमारी कोई कुट्टी थोड़ी हो गई है, बातचीत तो चलती रहेगी. And that's the beauty of diplomacy when it comes to China as well. You know China is an all-weather friend of Pakistan. You know China is supplying arms to Pakistan, but you are here in China to have these delegation level talks, to have the bilateral talk between both leaders. That's the beauty of diplomacy, and that fortunately or unfortunately.
I think Dr. Ranganathan has a question for you, Swati, or he has something to say.
No, Swati has made great points. I just want to ask you, see, all great nations have something to leverage for. If you remember, Trump imposed 150% tariffs on China. Immediately, China restricted the supply of rare earths, and then China had this leverage, and Trump decreased from 150% to 35%. Now, we admittedly, on the face of it, we haven't slapped reciprocal tariffs, or we haven't done anything what China has. But I'm just saying, Swati, I think the discussion should also deal with those 46 billion worth of Boeing 200 aircrafts, that civilian aircrafts, and 3.8 billion of PI aircraft that we had said that we are going to purchase purchase from Boeing. Things like that should happen. We should, I think, viscerally believe now we are no longer a soft power. We are a hard power. We should deal like that.
About as leverage. That's something India is well aware of, and Mr. Ranganathan is right. The P8I issue, and not just the P8I issue, but also the Striker issue, and one or two other cases, the Javelin, for instance, these can be used as leverage, Mr. Ranganathan, as he rightly said, and there is considerable talk about using the P8I issue as leverage. And that's a lot of money. That's a serious deal that's coming up.
Dr. Benkin, let me ask you this. 90 days concessions to China. Will India get any concession after this meeting, or are we going to have another 20% tariff? And the announcement comes through Truth Social.
Well, as I said when I started my last comment, I think India is doing exactly the right thing, because what India is saying is we are independent, we are strong, we will do what's best for our people, and I wouldn't be surprised if, whether it's announced separately or within the context of the
I'm sorry to interrupt, Dr. Benkin. As we speak, first pictures of that important bilateral, I can see Prime Minister Modi and Ajit Doval to his left, Vikram Misri, if I'm not wrong, to his right. And here's the handshake. Sinjoy, Xi Jinping, Prime Minister Modi, if body language or chemistry is anything to go by, what do you think?
Well, we can be hopeful. We can be hopeful that something positive will come out of it. Yes, of course, it's important. It's a message to America. It's a message to lots of other people. But importantly, let's hope something positive comes out of it. Let's hope that there is de-escalation, let's say, on the line of actual control. Let's say there is a change in the Chinese policy about trade. May not be a big one, but at least something there. Let's hope that other issues that are troubling India and China get sorted out, even if they are not sorted out. Remember one time during a meeting between Wen Jiabao and Prime Minister, and right at the beginning, even when the media was in the room, Wen Jiabao said, let's have a committee of senior bureaucrats from both sides, senior diplomats from both sides, and when I come to India, by the time I come to India a few months later, some forward movement would have been made and we would have had pieces of paper on the table. Now, if there is even a statement like that here, then we can say that this is a meeting which is moved towards the right direction.
Yeah. It's curious, I don't see our External Affairs Minister, Mr. Jaishankar, at least in this frame. Sinjoy?
Yes, the External Affairs Minister is not there. The Foreign Secretary is there. Vikram Misri is there. The National Security Advisor, Mr. Ajit Doval, is there. Two very important people. And all the border discussions are between Wang Yi and Ajit Doval. Let's not forget that. And it's a particularly important part of these negotiations. So naturally, Mr. Doval is there and Mr. Wang Yi is there.
Dr. Ranganathan, what should, beyond the optics of the meeting and the fact that Prime Minister is in China after 7 years, and, like we've been hearing during the broadcast and otherwise, that this narrative is being amplified that, look, this is a moment India and China can bury the things of the past and move ahead. I don't think we are at that position because of the, trust deficit is not quite the word. There is, there's no trust actually.
No, absolutely. As I said, I think, it would be a folly on our part to expect, a lot from this meeting. I think the fact this handshake is enough. I think this meeting has been a success, honestly. Because let's also deal with the elephant in the room. Is China a democracy? No. did we do well despite a lot of people, including many panelists out here, wanting us to sign up to the RCEP, which was essentially a free trade agreement with China? China manipulates its currency. China does underhand dealing. China does industrial espionage. China props up its companies. So, when you talk of, I'm fundamentally against high tariffs, but sometimes to prevent dictatorships dumping goods, you have to impose tariffs. So nothing's going to change. Only thing that is going to change is our association with Trump. And as I said, I am equally enamored with the prospective meeting of Mr. Modi with Mr. Putin than I am seeing these pictures. So let's not expect what is not going to happen. This handshake is enough. The meeting is I declare this meeting a success.
Okay. Mr. Kulkarni.
Of course, the handshake is a good beginning, but there'll be many more markers of success, I am sure, even in the bilateral meeting, in the broader SCO Summit meeting, and what is going to follow. Because I see that after this first meeting between the two leaders in 7 years, what will follow is a visit by either Prime Minister Modi to China or President Xi Jinping's visit to India, which has not happened in many years, and it should follow. So I don't see that only the handshake is a success. There are many more successes to come.
Let's bring in Swati quickly. Swati, the meeting has begun. I'm sure all eyes are on the joint statement, but a lot is being said also about the chemistry.
Absolutely. I was just in fact going to ask Dr. Ranganathan that if you're saying the handshake is a success, that the meeting is successful, it's a sign of that, then what if it's followed by a hug? Then what would Dr. Anand Ranganathan like to say? He can respond to that, but yes, there's a press briefing as well, which is going to happen 6:30 p.m. India time. Perhaps we'll get to know more about what happened in the delegation level talks as well. I'm not sure if we would get a chance to ask questions, but we're also looking forward to that. Apart from the joint statement, like you said, all the discussions that we've been having about the contentious issues between both the countries and how every country who's part of the SCO Summit, at least in the bilateral, is trying to position itself. What would this mean for America? How is Donald Trump going to look at it? One thing is for sure here, at least on ground at the moment, the sentiment is that, yes, both countries want the relationship to be normal and everybody wants to benefit out of a healthy relationship. To what extent you can balance that remains to be seen. Trade deficit is around $99.2 billion between China and India. Can we work something out there? That is also something that perhaps needs a discussion. It's not just about the border issue. There are other aspects when it comes to India and China. And like Dr. Ranganathan said, I think I'm agreeing with him for most of the points that he made. It's also about sending out a larger message. It's not at the moment just about India and China. It's also about India, China and Russia, which is half of the BRICS. And Donald Trump certainly does not like the SCO or the BRICS getting stronger.
Swati, Mr. Benkin is also wanting to respond, but Dr. Ranganathan was asked this question. Dr. Ranganathan, please bear with me. Let me first bring in Dr. Benkin. Dr. Benkin?
Back to something that was misstated. I agree with my colleague that the meeting itself is important. And I think I've explained that. That's an important message to Donald Trump and the United States of America, as well as to the rest of the world. It does indicate that India is an independent, self-reliant nation that's going to do what's best for the people of India. That's great. By the same token, I have to add that I believe my colleague misstated the situation when he said, well, the tariffs only affect 5%. The fact is, over the last several years, over the last several months, the United States government has been encouraging companies to leave China and move to India. And right now, India is the largest supplier of cell phones to the United States, among other things. And that if these things were ignored and we don't take into consideration just how important that economic element is. That's not the whole thing. That doesn't mean that geopolitics have to go a certain way. If we forget that, that can change, especially if people think Donald Trump.
I think, Dr. Benkin, you've got it all wrong. What Dr. Ranganathan was saying by reading out the numbers that it's only 5%, is what he was trying to tell you was that, look, Trump can do what he wants if he believes that this will, crush India, and that, Prime Minister Modi will pick up the phone and say, sir, please, I beg your mercy, etc., etc. That's not going to happen. We have other avenues, other markets. But, let's answer the question. Dr. Ranganathan, answer the question what Swati asked you. If this handshake is enough, what if there is a hug? Donald Trump won't be in a mood to play golf for a few days.
Now, if there is a hug, then I think India would offer the air defense systems to China, what China can improve on them vis-a-vis Pakistan. No, but, I want to come back to what Professor Benkin said. Look, let's not conflate the issues out here. Our disagreements and irritation with Trump have got nothing to do with what our relations with America are. Left to me, I would want Professor Benkin to be the next president of the United States of America. He's a perfectly reasonable man, and he's coming up with all the solutions that we need for a great India-US relationship. But the fact of the matter is, you cannot bully a large country like India. Now, very quickly to what Swati mentioned, I think it is also a fact that both India and China are great competitors moving forward. They would be even greater competitors. But it is also a fact that because of our lopsided or wrong foreign policy, India has consistently been punching below its weight, and China over the last 30 years has been consistently punching above its weight. Sooner or later, we expect an equalization, and that would be the real thaw in relations, but I'm not expecting that right now.
Congratulations, Dr. Benkin, on your nominations.
I guarantee you that, though, if that would happen, which it won't, I would be the best friend in the White House that India ever had.
That's a wrong answer. You should say, I refuse to accept the nomination, because Trump would not take this kindly. Okay. No tariffs on Namaste, sir. This is an Indian way of greeting, and no tariffs on this. But, let me bring in Dr. John Harrison, Homeland Security expert. Dr. Harrison, we've been... I would hope that we've had an enlightening conversation, and you're now joining us. What do you make of the optics of this meeting, Prime Minister Modi meeting President Xi Jinping, and how will Mr. Trump and his associates see this?
Well, it has certainly been enlightening, and it's also apparently had a potential impact on American domestic politics with a nomination. So it has been a very interesting morning.
कैलाश मानसरोवर यात्रा फिर से शुरू हुई। दोनों देशों के बीच डायरेक्ट फ्लाइट भी फिर से शुरू की जा रही है। हमारे सहयोग से दोनों देशों के 2.8 बिलियन लोगों के बीच जुड़े हुए। इससे पूरी मानवता के कल्याण का मार्ग भी प्रशस्त होगा। परस्पर विश्वास, सम्मान और संवेदनशीलता के आधार पर हम अपने संबंधों को आगे बढ़ाने के लिए प्रतिबद्ध है। एजेंसी चीन द्वारा SCO की सफल अध्यक्षता के लिए मैं आपको बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूं। एक बार फिर चीन यात्रा के निमंत्रण के लिए और आज की हमारी बैठक के लिए आपका हार्दिक धन्यवाद।
Opening remarks of Prime Minister Modi. Sorry, I had to cut you off. Dr. Harrison, please make your point.
No, that's fine. That's fine. No, I think most of these summits are about the optics. Leaders tend not to make great decisions without an awful lot of groundwork laid in advance. So I think the optics here are important, but it does highlight that while India and China are certainly trying to offer an alternative to what they see as maybe inconsistent, to put it politely, American leadership. There are still some very deep fundamental issues between India and China. And what's, I think, important is also for President Xi that he's coming out of this again, getting sort of the big catch, if you will, for the SCO. The SCO has not been seen as a major important player. And so at the very least, he gets to put on the world stage that his entity, he set this up, that this now has some sort of at least symbolic importance, if not practical importance. And I think that's going to be the more interesting thing that comes out of it, is what, if anything, practical does emerge. And I think that's going to be much further down the road. It does send a message to the White House that India is going to do what India has always done, very appropriately for any country, particularly one with the resources that India potentially has and also has, that it is going to cut its own foreign policy. And you can't take India for granted. And I think that's a very important message for whomever's in the White House, but particularly for the current administration.
Okay, just stay with us. Javed Ashraf is now joining us. He's former Indian ambassador to France, a distinguished diplomat. He's joining us live.